casually late to the
And
open
then-
session.
Where's my wrap?
That's today's
You don't give me my bag so that I can like carry it in. I was coming to get coffee,
Isn't
like
cute?
going to the back to get it.
We're gonna name him Tulsa.
All right, everyone.
We're gonna name him Tulsa after.
Well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order.
Because now I'm working
Remind folks that if they would like to speak to the board, they do need to fill out a speaker form found in the lobby. Before we get to that, some quick introductions to the folks up here at the table. To my right, Superintendent Degner, and a very smiley Director Pilcher-Hayek, Director Eastham, and Director Williams. To my left, Vice President Malo, Director Finch, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. And I'm Sean Eystone. I never introduced myself. Our first item is community comment. I do not have any slips, so we can go ahead and move into our agenda approval for tonight.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. And next up, we have our consent. Are there any questions from directors as they were looking through the bills? Any items that directors would like to pull from consent? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. And we can move down. We have a couple public hearings, and first up is Wickham Sidewalk project.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Wickham Elementary Sidewalk and Accessibility Project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on May 24th, 2022. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on May 25th, 2022. The district will receive bids on this project at 2 p.m. June 16, 2022 at the Facilities Management Office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa, 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on May 25th, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close that public hearing and move on to our second one, which is about bonds.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed issuance of approximately $76,500,000 school infrastructure sales, services, and use tax revenue bonds. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on May 31st, 2022. Are there any comments from the board? Are there any comments from the community?
All right, we can close that public hearing and go down to our presentations, and we have our annual asset protection report. I assume I'm turning it over to Les.
Thank you, President Eystone. The report was presented in the board packet. I think it pretty much stands as presented. Just a couple things that I would like to share, though, is that the greatest risk to schools as we move forward is three areas: sexual liability claims, cyber liability claims, and just storms in general. Iowa's become the new path for storms. If you look at violent storms, unfortunately, we've had a pretty decent spring, and so hopefully that pattern continues. But the underwriters on property insurance are looking at the expected risk. They're not looking at past experience anymore because it has nothing to do with the actual coverage. And so you may have seen it on your own individual personal policies for your house, in which there was a substantial increase in many of those premiums for the coverage. it's impacting all levels, and so that's why you are seeing, in the comparison between the prior years, a significant jump in the property rates. It's those expected claims that are coming through there, both from property for the storms as well as the cyber protection. And kudos to Adam in our IT department. He's not here tonight, but he's doing a great job of working with our insurance carriers and providing the necessary protections to the best of our abilities to mitigate the cyber claims and the cyber attacks on the district. So I'm working with other people in the district to help mitigate some of these, but those are a couple of the areas that are the hot buttons that you'll see and the changes as we go.
All right, I'd throw it out there if anybody had any questions or anything about it. I think it's a pretty straightforward report, so. All right, thank you, Les. I think we can move on. We can move into our discussion items. We have two, and first up is Hills Elementary, and I think I'd kick it over to Matt to lead us off, and then we can move on.
Yeah, I don't really have a large opening for this one. The board's had a conversation in operations committee and in a work session at different points, and we have the construction of a new Hills Elementary on the board-approved FMP 2.0 timeline, and we've kind of exchanged a lot of information and answered questions electronically with the board, and so I think it was just time to make sure we'd had a conversation in a regular meeting and answer any of those questions or any outstanding questions or new ones that may still exist for folks. And so I think the opportunity is really for the board to have that conversation and make sure if there was anything else the team could address from that angle or anything that needed to be communicated in an open meeting that they were able to do so. So we're ready and willing to answer any of those or engage in the conversation with you guys.
Yep, I'd throw it out there to whoever wants to kind of start the conversation.
Thank you, Matt and Sean. I just wanted to share my thoughts on an aspect of the elementary school in Hills, Iowa. One, it's this in this district, it's the school with the smallest enrollment. However, it has, I think, two really neat features in that situation, that condition. One, it's a very neighborhood school for students that live in the Hills community. Hills is a relatively small community, but I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that most students who live in Hills can walk to their elementary school if they choose to do so. And second, I think it's a school that is attended by students from at least 2 or 3 mobile home or manufactured housing parks. And in my experience with working with people living in Forest View over the last few years, it has occurred to me, or it seems to me, that folks living in those areas, those neighborhoods, form very close-knit and supportive neighborhood groups together. So even though students may come from, may need to ride a bus to get to Hills from a manufactured housing park, to me, they are a neighborhood who's attending a school. And they don't walk to it, but they get together and they ride to it. So to me, that neighborhood aspect of this particular elementary school seems to be as strong as any of the other elementary schools, if not more so, in fact.
Thanks, Charlie. Anybody else?
I have some questions and some thoughts about it. So we did discuss this previously at the April 12th meeting. It was on our agenda to look at the FMP 2.0. During that meeting, Hills was touched on just briefly by Dwayne as he went through all of the projects, and I rewatched the meeting to make sure I understood what was discussed. And he mentioned that we had come to Hills, the municipality, representatives from the municipality, whether that's the council or the mayor, and given 5 ideas for what we thought would work. And at the April 12th meeting, it was explained to us that 3 of them didn't work. There were 2 left, and we were going to see if they would be a good idea. And at that same agenda item, Director Eystone explained that the FMP 2.0 vote's purpose at that meeting was to hold the board to a process by which every time the FMP was adjusted or amended, and I for some reason think he used the word adjustment, that we would vote again. And so we anticipated this being a plan that would be that would change. In addition, on the document that Dwayne made, and I don't know if you want me to call you Mr. Van Heemer, because I just called him director. All right, well, but on that, are we calling that a spreadsheet? You know, your graph where you explain all the projects. The first step in Hills is not build or purchase, it's discussion. It's coded green, I think. And anyway, it's noted clearly in the FMP that discussion was going to be first. So I consider this still the discussion phase. And I mention that because there's been some talk of any kind of commitment or promise to Hills. We did make a promise in the FMP 1.0, a process which I was very committed to and deep into. We kept the promise. We did the upgrades we needed to do. We have also said for years that we needed to see the growth that Hills kept saying they would have, and there isn't that growth. In fact, there's been a decrease in numbers, and as all of us know, there are 48 kids currently attending Hills that live in Hills, and it's weighted heavily in the older groups. In other words, in the next 2 years, I would anticipate the number dropping into the 30s of students that live in Hills that attend Hills. Then, as Charlie just mentioned, we bus kids south to Hills, and we bus them from primarily to trailer parks. And that is not something that this district has ever done. We've never said, oh, let's identify a catchment area by trailer parks. And in fact, if you look at the map, which I think is so important to look at all the time, look at where the kids come from, look what our catchment areas are. You know, we did that when we were campaigning. You wanted to make sure you knew who you were talking to. Where did our kids go to school? Well, the kids that we send to Hills live north of other catchment areas, of other elementary catchment areas. It was just an easy way to send people down there because they lived in these isolated places. That's not something we have as a principle here. We don't send kids just because they're already in a group. There's supposed to be more consideration to that. So I mention that because I don't think we have good cause to build a school in Hills when there are so few students that live there that attend it. And instead, I would suggest we look at building a school in the southwest of Iowa City where it would make more sense, because there may be growth between here and Hills. I mean, it makes sense. I think there will be. There hasn't been a lot, but if it does grow, it probably won't grow significantly in that municipality. So that's something I've touched on, the commitment to Hills and building a school there. I don't see that commitment exists, at least in terms of this board voting on it. I understand that there have been representations made to Hills that we do care and we do want to build a school. Having said that, we've also learned that Hills hasn't been easy about that build project. In fact, they've been difficult. So there is no commitment in terms of what the board has voted on, and I don't think there's good reason for it. The other thing I think we have to look at is before we say build it, we need to know who's going to go there. I've already mentioned who currently goes. I would like to know if that's really a catchment area we're comfortable with. 2 trailer parks in the middle of other catchment areas, in fact, north of them, and 38 kids that live in the town. Or 48 now, but watch, it'll probably decrease to the 30s. Okay, I think the community is going to want to know before we say build it in Hills. They're going to want to know who we're going to keep sending there. I want to know before I build a building in Hills. So that's one thing. And the other thing I want to know is we asked for the cost of busing. There is a cost to it. And we all talk about busing, and it's necessary, okay? It's part of a district our size. There's going to be busing. But let's make sure we're busing the right way and the most efficient way. I don't see that happening again because of the location of who we're busing. So those are 2 points, and let me make sure I'm not forgetting any. I guess so as I thought about this, and I know I might be on my own on this, but, the talk of, well, we've just planned on doing this. This is, every year we have to look at these things. We have to look at the budget cuts that are coming our way. We know they're coming our way. We're worried about them coming our way. We've had to become more efficient. In the next 4 years, we're going to have to become even more efficient based on the funding and the lack of support we get from our state. So it doesn't really matter that much if we thought we would build a school in Hills. What matters is before we build it, we know we should. Because once you build it, you got to fill it. You got to staff it. You got to bus kids to it, and it better be the right decision.
Thank you. Anybody else want to join the conversation? I'll add, I have a few thoughts. I think you make some fair points, Maka. I would say that I'm very proud of Hills as the blue ribbon school that it was awarded. So I have to give them props for doing great work there. There was a meeting, I think at this point with only 3 of us that were on the board at the time, with folks from the Hills Council and the mayor and staff at the elementary, several years ago, where we discussed, the possibilities of the school and just the struggles that they've had with the building itself. One thing I would just kind of pose to whoever, really, because it's purely speculation. I know that when we build schools, right, people tend to start building near schools. I think that's a concern I have with I don't know if the school in Hills at this point is drawing anybody into that town, because the school itself is not great, right? I could speculate that a brand new school might draw some population down there and it could increase, but again, that's speculation, right? So those are just some of the thoughts that I have in my head. I mean, I don't know, we have, as you said, kind of given the indication that this has been the plan, right? I mean, it's in there to have a new school built there. So yeah, if that's not the direction we're going, right, it's going to require a vote. Just because the conversations that I've had personally, I would tell you that I would still vote to build the building in Hills. I don't know that everybody else here would, but that's me. So that's just where I'm coming from. But you make some valid points. I think Charlie made some valid points too. So that's just where I'm coming from at this point.
I would mention that the idea of building a new school in Hills, that's something we've been talking about, and what kind of resources we put toward Hills is something we've talked about for as long as you and I have been working on school district stuff, which is a long time, like predates us being on the board, including you. I know that the questions I raised today aren't new. I know I'm a new member to the board, but these are issues that we've looked at a ton. So I want to make sure that as people are paying attention to this, which I know people are going to pay attention, especially if we build a school in Hills, people are going to be asking the questions I'm asking tonight. And they need to know that I'm not coming out of the blue on this. We've talked about this. There have been emails about this for the last year and 2 years. The exact same questions I'm bringing up with the exact same detail have been on the board's mind. However, I don't think we had to, and I'll blame myself, I don't think we combed through it very carefully. And I made that clear when we were in a closed meeting. And I think, again, before we commit to building a school, I don't even know how I can vote on it. I don't have basic information about it yet. I don't know who's going to go to it. Are we conceding that it'll be the same catchment area? I mean, I need to know basic things, information I don't have.
I would just say that looking at the total students served is only one part of the equation. I think what's important to look at is the average class size, because that's what really drives the cost of our schools. Yes, our smaller schools each have a principal, and that is an added administrative burden. But when you look at the projected Hills Elementary average class sizes for the 22-23 school year, they're averaging at 19 to 21 students. And then you pop over and you look at Kirkwood, and they're at 17, 19 students per class. You can pop down to Twain, they're at 14, 15, 16 students per class size. So I think that as an efficiency and cost, the students that we're serving at Hills we're filling the classrooms, and we're being efficient with how those classroom sizes are staffed. Now, I would take a guess that Dwayne does not plan on building, that's okay, that Dwayne does not plan on building an elementary school the size of Christine Grant on the Hills blueprint. We're not going to build a school that's meant to house 550 students, because we would never anticipate Hills serving that large of a population. But the school that's built is going to be sized appropriately for the population size. And so, to me,
did you want me to answer that?
I was just messing with you because I saw you were talking.
Well,
There wasn't an actual question in
we
there,
were
Dwayne.
talking about catchment areas, but
No, but I mean, my point is, the plan is not to build a Christine Grant-sized school on the Hills blueprint that's going to serve 550 students, right? We're not going to spend that.
absolutely. Yeah, the preliminary conversations I've had with architects down there is probably in the neighborhood of 400 or less.
Yeah, so I think what's important to look at with the Hills plan is, again, the number of students served is important, but the efficiency that we can operate the building at, and are the classrooms operating at an efficient sized model? And when we compare them to other schools, especially other schools in the same RAM that Hills is at, that they are efficiently staffed, or student populated rooms.
I do have a couple comments, if you don't mind. In response to some of the questions that Maka had. That graph, and you guys approve it, and you approved a whole list, there's a lot of projects on there. But I look at it as a roadmap, okay? So, in order to accomplish a certain project, we have to go through certain steps. So to answer your question about Hills, there was a purple bar in there, I think it was purple, and for discussion, because we've had a joint meeting down there in the past, we've had a city council meeting with staff here, or, our staff with their city council, and there's a lot of uncertainty about where the building should be. Should it be where it is? Or I had proposed flipping it with the park, and so we wanted to talk to the city about that, and they were reluctant to go down that road. And I brought it up several times, and I've tried. And at one point, Director Malone asked that we exhaust all of our options. So that was what we did, and that was all within that purple bar. Let's talk to the city, let's figure out what we can do. So we're kind of at a standstill. I think they would be happy with the building wherever, but I don't believe it's in the best interest of the school district to put it on that site. It's too small. And so we need a better site if we are to build. So, in terms of what we're doing, I need direction from the board to pursue. I've put the architects on hold. I've talked to landowners down there, a lot of different things, but where I'm not moving forward, I don't think we should move forward with this until I'm directed by the superintendent. This is what we're gonna do. But so it's just a roadmap. Can things move around? Sure. Is it subject to change? Sure. Every one of the projects we do, we bring to the board one by one. Matter of fact, at the next meeting in June, first meeting in July, you're gonna see 2 or 3 projects that we're moving forward, that you're gonna have the opportunity to review and say, keep working or stop. You always have that ability to do that. So I just want you to know that nothing's really been said as, in terms of where or how big. It's just, I think in this one particular school, because I go back to 2012. Well, no, it's 2013, in the spring of 2013. And we set a project list, and we very purposefully did not make any improvements at Hills. Because Hills, the building itself, God bless them, it was built by volunteers, you know, and it was built by the community, and it was not built by the school district. And it really doesn't meet modern standards. And I told the board that at that point. So we spent $750,000 making security improvements, HVAC improvements, just to keep the building operational, and that's all the board committed to that project. That's what generated that meeting that Sean just referred to about what's the future of Hills. So we kept it open. It's not the best building. It doesn't meet modern code, but that's where we're at. I think it really is a tough call for the board, and I'm not privy to or expert in the area of how many kids live in the area or what's there. I do know that on the north end of town, there's several new homes that have been built, and they're nice homes. So there is some stimulus there. When we first started down there, it was we were going to build some apartment buildings, and they built the apartment buildings. And the city decided to also put in a water line, a water service down there, because Hills was on a well when I got here. And we had to inspect that well once a week and certify that it was operational. So it was a pretty time-consuming thing. So the city made the improvements with the water. They thought that would stimulate growth. And the only other comment I have that we've talked about over the years is that if we were to build a building there, you would draw a lot of people who might open and roll in from other areas that work in Iowa City, and they drop their kids off at, is it Lone Tree? In Riverside, and places like that south of here. They drop their kids off because they didn't want to put them in Hills, but if they had a new building, they might. So it's just a thought, you know, that you need to consider as well. And that's kind of anecdotal. You can't prove it, you know. So anyway, those are my comments.
I just have something really quickly. There's been good points raised by everybody that spoke so far tonight, and some questions that I think we as a board can continue to discuss, because as Dwayne just mentioned, we have a roadmap in front of us, and things can move around as needed. But I do think before we decide one way or the other, we have to have some of those questions answered, but also allow the community to soak this in. Because that FMP 2.0 has been out there, people are assuming we're building a school in Hills. And now the conversation tonight, they're hearing some questions about whether or not that's the right thing. And it may very well be that after we look into it and hear more from the community, it's like, yeah, no, let's not do that. But my guess is we're going to hear from a portion of our community, probably a good portion of our community, about the board's plans and commitment and how it they're going to feel blindsided. I don't know how else to put it, because we've talked about this for so long, and it's not any reason not to move forward, but one meeting for me isn't enough reason for me to open up FMP 2.0 to vote on this particular issue without continued conversation. And hopefully we can have that continued conversation at our next meeting, because there is something else on FMP 2.0 that I really hope we can discuss regarding just overall school safety for some places.
Thanks, Ruthina. I'm new to this conversation. I don't know the history of Hills. One of the questions I had was, is the current school beyond repair? And Dwayne just answered that for me. I would really be interested in hearing what the community has to say about this. I think Maka brought up some very logical points that everyone at the table has some very good opinions, and I think we need to hear from the community.
I would like to add, though, school is safe, and it does have life safety systems in it, fire alarms and all that, so it's not an unsafe place. It's just the nature of the construction, the way it was built, is it worthy of spending, millions of dollars to upgrade it to our standards? And the decision was made that maybe not, that maybe it should be replaced.
I'm going to just follow up because Director Williams mentioned the population there and the class sizes. The class sizes are what they are because they're dictated by SES. We're busing 2 trailer parks down there. I'm going to just say it. The people that live in trailer parks aren't the most vocal people in our community. I would say, in fact, that they're some of the least likely people to feel empowered to question why they're getting bused to Hills. And again, you referenced the population of students that attend there. Because of what I just said about who currently attends, I think we're going to have to take another look at that. And so I don't know that we can really make any assessment about the current school and who attends there when I think it could very, very easily be different. The population will probably be different. I do appreciate what you're saying about people open enrolling. I think that's an interesting point. I wonder if there is a way for us to get a little bit more insight about it. I could see that happening. I just don't know if we're supposed to build it so they come. I don't know that that's how we function here when our budget is tight. So that would be my concern with that one. I also don't know that the overwhelming majority of this community is going to have a hard time understanding that when 38 or 48 kids from the town go to the school, it might not be worth it to bus the balance of kids in and build a new school down there. I think that's a pretty easy thing for the community to grasp. And I know there will be people from Hills that are disappointed. And in fact, the current families may be disappointed. I understand that, but we have to treat that catchment area like we treat all other catchment areas. It has to be sensible.
I just want to make my observations about students attending Hills now that are not living in the community itself. I just want to say that I've had some experience with working with people in Forest View, and most of those folks have kids that go to one of our schools, Man, Southeast, or City High. Okay? My experience has been that there folks in those in Forest View are very articulate and clear about what they want and about how to get it. The nonprofit I work with, the Center for Worker Justice, has participated in their advocacy for their own ends and their own future. But the folks living there and the folks who are sending their children to our school, they're driving that process. One thing I think we could consider, if if the staff would like to do this, is making some inquiries of families that are going to Hills now that are not living in Hills, and seeing what their preferences might be for where they would like their kids to go to elementary school. I think that could be done, and I'm not sure perhaps with the participation of the principal or the staff there or not. I think that's up to the superintendent about how to do something like that. And lastly, I've thought about what will Hills become as a community over the next few years, several years, and what will this district need be asked to do in terms of providing an elementary school in that community for those kids. And it occurs to me that Hills might become more than its recent history has been, which is fairly stable population, I think. I've thought of this. North Liberty, as an example, 2 decades ago, I suspect, was a community similar in size to what Hills is. There's a lot of differences between where they're located and where people can get to from where they're from the community and so forth. But Hills might be a longer ago North Liberty. And I think that's something that I would like, that I'm considering in trying to make a decision about what our present building plans are for that elementary school.
I just want to clarify, I didn't at all say that they weren't articulate. I said they aren't empowered. Just want to be real clear on that one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sorry.
I did write one note down from something you talked about, Maka, that I forgot to mention, and I think I'm very much aware that the next item on our agenda is boundary discussion, but generally we talk boundaries, right, when we're opening a new school. Generally that new school is at a place that currently doesn't have a school, as opposed to a school in Hills replacing a school in Hills, but I think that is an appropriate time to visit boundaries and catchment areas and things like that. So I think that's a valid point, is that would be the time to look at that. And as we kind of look forward in the plan, right, there's 2-3 other potential schools in there, and I think we probably have to look at it holistically, right? If we put one here, then and here and here, and even if it's over like a 3 to 6 year span, right, as they're popping up, do we want to change boundaries every year as we open one, or do we want to be a little more intentional? And maybe we can talk more about that in our next agenda item, but I think schools opening is when we talk about boundaries, and so I think that's a fair point. Any more thoughts on that? I think the conversation will continue. It sounds like we have more to talk about in this area, more questions to answer, and I think if we're going to bring it back, at the next meeting or meetings after that, I think we need to maybe kind of get down on paper the kind of questions we want to try and tackle and answer and things like that, so we're prepared to get them all answered, right, as we're sitting up here having the conversation. And
The only
getting
thing I would
that
add on-
feedback from
Sure, the
people.
Exactly, Sean, that's where I was gonna go. The only thing I was gonna add, and to reiterate what Dwayne said, is, we love community feedback and input on that, but we just also want to be transparent about what that construction cycle looks like. And so having a discussion that lasts 2 months doesn't necessarily mean a project's delayed 2 months. It means a project's delayed 14 months, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to rush anybody. I think we just want to be kind of transparent in that process, that agreed feedback and making sure we're on the same page. But that really does mean that it could be a full other year before we would do anything. I think it's just important to be clear on that we know kind of that's what we're talking about. So as we plan about how quickly we want to move, weeks turn into years in the construction world pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I think the rate we're going with this discussion, that it's unlikely that school will be ready before the fall of '25. So, if we're not ready to start in '23 by any means, there's too much needs to be done. The planning, the property, all that, so a 24 start means a 25 school year. That's probably the best you could do right now, and that's okay.
All right. Anything else on that? All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next item. It does say boundary discussion. This is a little bit different, but I think I'm going to kick it over to Director Williams, as she asked to have this on here and had something specific in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Director Eystone, and I appreciate the board putting some time to have this discussion. Some history of where I'm coming from with it is my children went through the boundary adjustment in, gosh, I'm terrible with dates. It's 2020.
2017?
So it was 4 years, so 4 years
2017.
ago,
It was
yes.
18.
And we got transferred elementary schools because of the massive boundary adjustment, which I think was great, and I fully support. I don't want anybody to think that I'm being critical of that, because underlying that boundary adjustment was our commitment to having as equal as possible FRL spread throughout our schools. I think that is an essential goal that we need to keep looking at and always have at the forefront of our mind when we're looking at who goes to what schools. But that being said, what I've been watching since my time on the board are our RAM projections moving away from what was a little bit more equal and starting to get stratified again at either end. And I think what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, or 15 years is we're going to have to do another significant reboundary adjustment if we don't take some proactive work towards that. I think North Liberty is a perfect example. I'm looking at our RAMs, and of the 5 lowest FRL schools, 3 of them are currently in North Liberty. And so what I would like to avoid, because I know how difficult it is that big type of boundary redistribution that impacts current families. It's tough. It's tough to move somewhere and think this is the school and have your kids enrolled in the school and attend the school and then be told, nope, you're gonna rip apart friend groups and you're gonna go to this other place. And so I've been mulling it over, what can we do to stop that? And obviously we can't control what gets built where, right? We're not zoning and we don't have any say in that, nor should we. We're the school district. But I think that maybe one of the things we could do is look at, what I'd like to see from the admin team is look at kind of our undeveloped space in the district. Space that hasn't been developed, it hasn't been built. It's just really probably rural Johnson County, unincorporated Johnson County. And instead of assigning those zones to current attendance centers, think about unzoning them and have them unattached to any specific school. And then as the development happens, then we take a look at what is being built and what is going to be the demographic makeup of the students who will be living in this area, and then what school does it make sense for them to attend. So rather than committing in advance and saying, if you buy a house here in 10 years, you will attend this elementary school, the commitment is, if you buy a house here in 10 years, we don't know where you're going to go to school. But you will know by the time you purchase your house, and we can work with the developers and get a process in place where we then assign an attendance zone to that land when it's being considered for development. But that way, we retain some flexibility over where our students attend without bringing the rug off of, ripping the rug off of anybody's feet and changing things up on them. I don't know if Director Pilcher took property from Sheldon Kurtz, but it still sticks with me. There's coming to the nuisance, right? And he would give us this example where, if you buy the farm and it's a century farm, and then all of a sudden the people next door start up a hog operation and ruin your land. That is terrible. But if you buy the farm next to the hog operation, you know what you're getting yourself into. And so if we have and I know I'm rambling, I'm very sorry, I hope it's making sense. But if we have undeveloped land and we end up zoning it to an attendance center where everyone's gonna get bused down south for 30 minutes, because that's where we need to send those kids to maintain parity with our FRL. But you buy a house there and you agree to live there and you know that that's part of the package, is that your kids are gonna go to this school that's farther away, that's not a neighborhood school. I think that's gonna be an easier thing for the community to digest, because they will go into the situation with eyes wide open, rather than thinking that they're going to go to this neighborhood school and then realize, whoops, nope, just kidding, you're gonna get sent across town on a bus, by the way, starting in 2nd grade. So that's just kind of my thoughts is, again, I am not talking about changing any of our attendance centers where we currently have students attending. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about undeveloped land, primarily in probably unincorporated Johnson County, or maybe on the fringes of some of the cities that has not been developed. And instead of committing that to a specific attendance area now, just saying we're not going to commit that undeveloped land until we have a better picture of what the FRL rates are at our schools and where those students should attend to maintain parity in FRL.
So I've had some conversations with Lisa about this notion, and then I'm tried to apply my planning and zoning experience. And I'm thinking about 2 things. One, zoning is a tool to create via zoning mixed income areas has very limited success in much of the country, and especially, and that applies to this county as well. So I think from a school district viewpoint, as Lisa has expressed, being able to draw attendance areas based upon where kids are living in different economic groups, it would be better done during the plating process of the zoning process itself, because that's before people are living in that area, in that neighborhood. But they would know after the district decides what the attendance area is for a particular plat, they would know where what their school is. And it would also be some inducement, I think, for developers, residential developers especially, to pay a more attention about where they're building mixed income neighborhoods. So I think personally, I think this is an approach well worth looking at in more detail, and am eager to do what I can to bring something to the board that we can talk about in more specificity.
I would say that for forever, we've talked about how when you are in a particular catchment area, there's no guarantee you stay in it. So I want to always make sure that that's clear, that it's possible you'll get moved into a catchment area and it's not the end of the world. It's part of being in a district of our size, and it's necessary. So I always want to make sure that the community knows that that's just part of the deal. My concern with your idea is what cities and developers will think about that, because I don't know how many people want to buy property if they're being told, regardless of when they're told it. Even though you're in the middle of this catchment area, you're actually an island. And instead of moving people around that might make more sense geographically, we're going to choose you because you were tabula rasa, right? Like, I just, my concern would be the pushback we would get from developers and cities.
No, and I certainly think that we should talk to them, but, my duty is not to the developers in the cities, it's to creating an equitable school district where all kids have opportunities to access great schools and great resources.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Lisa, and I agree with that philosophy. I think it's unfortunate that the school district has to kind of correct what really should be a planning and zoning issue, but we always find ourselves there, right? I guess, just off the top of my head, what I think could happen is, it may influence who buys those houses. It may be people who don't have children, older couples. And, there's always workarounds. And so, it will be kind of a difficult, I think we should open up the discussion, but I do see people kind of doing the workarounds, and that maybe it won't work out as we kind of envision or plan, but it's definitely worth a discussion. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to digest it all. In theory, it sounds wonderful, right? That we can, we're just going to hold off till we know what's there, right? I have a hard time seeing it work out. You made the comment of someone knows that they might be bust, right? And they're intentionally going there. I just wonder, who's the person that's going to intentionally do that? Maybe there will be people, and and then that depends on at what point in the process do you say, all right, we're deciding now that this place is going to this school over here, right? Is it when the first house is built, or when developer says, all right, I'm gonna start building this type of housing there, like at what point it'll affect that. So once people know or don't know, I think Director Finch is right, like that might affect who's going to do it, maybe in a good way, right? But maybe not. I wonder if it's, you kind of, I don't know, hedge your bets a little bit and be like, all right, this place over here, it's gonna be either this one, or this one, schools, right? So you don't lock it into one, but you know that it's one of these few or something like that. That might be a little more palatable to people. But I am having a hard time picturing it working in practice. I think it'd be, to your point, would work great for a district, but I don't know if builders or developers or cities are going to embrace that idea, and then does this space just never get developed? I don't even know if that's a bad thing necessarily, right? So yeah, chew on that a little bit.
And I want to point out, it doesn't necessarily always result in busing,
Right,
right?
fair.
Like, if the development fits with the nearest school, then, so it's not always like, okay, well, no matter where we're going to build new stuff, all those kids are getting bused. I don't want to make it sound like that. You know, the hope would be that if the housing is diversified and contributes positively to the local school in that it keeps it at the same FRL or balances it out. So if it's a low FR school but high income housing, that would reduce the FRL rate. Or if it's the result, it would increase the FRL rate, right? So
Yeah. But then it might overflow that school, and then you have other people that might have to move because now the school's got too many people in it. I mean, that's what happens with them when we're building too fast, and that's why we try and be proactive with new schools, which is always interesting too, because then that's instant building, right? Wherever we decide that we're gonna build a school, that's part of the equation too, right? Like, here's a property that we own that potentially is gonna have a school on it. About guarantee you that the housing that's gonna be around there is not gonna be mixed housing, right? No matter how much we want it to be, it's probably not. So that's
I
a
don't know,
concern as
because
well.
I would give the example of the new development that's going across the street from Liberty. And Dwayne, I think you want to comment on that, but I think it's pretty mixed.
They've got different styles of housing. I don't know that very many of them are affordable.
The other direction.
I think the way we've approached it, you know, historically, for at least for the 20-some years I've been around, is that you work with developers. In other words, you know where they're gonna go. And the best example is what's going on south of Weber. Okay? That whole southwest corridor, I call it, that's sat stagnant for years. But now the city's finally gonna put the sewer underneath the interstate, underneath 380, and extend it out to that. And sewers are what drive developments, believe it or not. That's what the builders follow, those sewer lines, and they spread out from it. And it's a fact. And, because I built for many years, but I, watched it done. But it's, the best thing the school district can do now is work with the actual developers and set aside properties and pieces of parcels and land. Because if you wait till the houses are in, it's too late. So, to your point, south of Liberty High School, we worked with Scanlon. We bought that 40-acre parcel several years ago because we knew that would start up. That's actually in Coralville, south of Liberty. And so we knew that was gonna, we'd had discussions with Kelly over at the city, and we knew that was eventually gonna take off. And we bought a parcel north of Liberty for the same reason. So, but that's from the developer, and that's really the way school districts, you put them in the right place. I think your idea is intriguing. You had to have those undesignated areas, but I don't know how, I'd have to think about it.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, it sounds interesting and open for continued discussion, but, just the pessimist in me think about the already developed spaces and new developments that we have going up, that not saying that this current board would have to look at attendance zones, but I don't know if that plan would be soon enough to prevent attendance changes. I mean, it's a plan to discuss, But I don't want people listening or viewing this to think that, that would negate any need for possible redistricting of people currently zoned to places.
No, and I want to be clear, the stuff that's being built on, that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah.
And so what I'd be interested in seeing from the team is a map, right? Like, first of all, like, what areas are we talking about? What currently are undeveloped land in our attendance area? Where are those pieces of property? And how are they zoned right now? What, like, the south of Weber, I know we have a plot down there and that we could always build another elementary school, but if we didn't, what's the kind of current state, and how much land are we talking about, and what's in the city and what's in unincorporated Johnson County, and just kind of getting our heads around what the land is. That's one of the things I'd like to see.
I don't know if anybody can help me remember. I want to say it when we did do the boundaries, and it was 2018. I remember that year. That was a long year. There was an area that we were very intentionally, that didn't have housing in it. I want to say it was in Coralville somewhere, but we knew housing was coming there, and so we put it in a school kind of intentionally to balance it before there was anybody there. Is that ringing any bells? It's ringing a bell with Paul. He's nodding. So we kind of did something of that. It was zoned to a place, or boundaried to a place, if you will. So it was done intentionally, as I recall.
And so it just seems if we're doing this, but we're trying to guess at 5 years out, if we can just have the flexibility to guess, a year out instead of 5, we might be better. We might do a better job at it than trying to read the tea leaves. Now, we just give ourselves some space and flexibility to do it a little bit sooner to when the actual development takes place.
It seems to me that a policy like this following the creation of a plat, because a plat is a formal designation of what kind of housing is going to be built in this area. And that pretty much, in my experience, that pretty much happens. Developers say, I want this parcel zoned RS5, and I want you to approve this plat that shows 50 houses, single-family detached houses in this parcel. That pretty much happens, and that, within 4 or 5 or 10 several years, there are 50 single-family detached houses built there. And I think what we're talking about is talking with developers and saying that put in 30 detached family houses, 20 multifamily houses, which will influence price. It's not going to be affordable. You're not affordable to very folks with very low incomes. You're right about that, Sean. But it will change the distribution of where somewhat lower priced housing actually gets built in relation to where schools are.
I think we're all intrigued by the concept, but the pessimists
I'm going to
in
take
some
it
of
as a
us
win.
are.
I'm going to take that as a win. I like intrigued.
I think that I do think that the board agrees that balancing SES is a priority. So this discussion is not about whether we agree about that. I think it's just more about whether we think this particular strategy is viable. And I'm glad you brought it to our attention, because any way we can, and plus any way we can encourage North Liberty to have housing that's not just for upper class people, that'd be great. So far, no one's had success in convincing North Liberty to do that. So again, I'm glad you brought it up, and I think maybe, Lisa, you're right, we want to have some kind of map so we can look at like a specific example. And I think to make it real in that way, it would be easier for us to analyze it.
Yeah, I think the map's a good place to start, right?
I'll put a plug in for the city of Iowa City. And recently, Chase and I have been in no less than 3 or 4 meetings with the city planners at Iowa City. And they're doing an excellent job of requiring developers to put in a mixed developments, like commercial, high-density apartments, condos, and homes. And the city of Iowa City does an excellent job of that, and you should know that they really do. And they've included us in those conversations, and we appreciate that. We've had them about the southwest corridor and the southeast corridor. So they are working on it and doing a good job with it.
All right. Got some next steps. All right. Anything else on this one before we move on? Still got quite a bit to go. So, all right, let's keep us moving. Thanks for the conversation. So let's move into some action items. And first up is our use of tax revenue bonds. I think we've talked about this already in the past, but I don't know, give us a quick synopsis, Les.
Again, as I previewed last meeting or 2 meetings ago, this is one of the steps in the issuance of bonds. You'll get next meeting off, but then there'll be 2 action items in the July meetings as well before they're issued, and we actually receive the cash around the 5th of August is the expected receipt of those dates. So,
Are there any questions from directors on this one? All right, I'd entertain the motion.
I move that we approve the resolution.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thanks, Kim. Next up is a superintendent contract. We did meet as a group. I don't want to go into too many specifics, but we do a nice 360 review with Matt. So board members reply and school administrators and folks here at the ESC kind of weigh in on some of the standards, or all the standards. And so we reviewed those as a group, and Matt is doing very well. I think one of the biggest takeaways from that is sort of the very transparent focus that Matt and the district has towards equity, and really driving those points home. And so those came through with a lot of the conversation. So the contract there, for everyone awareness, right, is extending it 1 year from the current number, and as was in the contract already, that the salary increase was based on what our teachers and other staff got. So we did not negotiating a number. So those are the changes that are in there. I think it's appropriate time for me to say that Matt and I've been very, very happy with the decision we made to have you be our superintendent. I think you've done great work and have put us moving in the right direction. I think we've got, I won't say everybody, but the vast majority of our district is all pointing in the same direction, and I don't think that was true necessarily in previous years. And so I think that's a huge, it's from you, right? The direction that you've given us is really given everybody focus, and I think we're heading all in a positive direction because we're all steering the same way now. So that's all I got to say on that. I don't know if anybody else wants to weigh in or just take the vote. Go ahead.
I would add that I think the focus on equity is true, but I also think the focus on education and excellence is something that I'm excited that that Superintendent Degner's administration is going to be focused on. I think the high reliability schools model is a perfect example of how we're going to focus on excellent education in our district. So I would also say that we continue to refine our review process of the superintendent, and this board has committed to making that process clear and consistent as we move forward. So the community can know that we take that process very seriously.
And I'd just like to say that we had some comments about needing to have performance standards in the superintendent's contract. And I just wanted to express that my view is that this contract does have performance standards for the superintendent in it. That's because the contract clearly says that the superintendent, excuse me, Matt, serves at the pleasure of the board. And the superintendent also is tasked with implementing the policies of the board. Those policies include the district and the board's strategic plan, which is a set of basically performance measure or performance goals. And so to me, this board and other boards can look at the superintendent's history in meeting the things that are called for in the district's strategic plan, and hold the superintendent accountable or laudable, in that situation. So I think this is a performance measure contract.
Anyone else?
Good point, Charlie. Thank you for that. Matt, I just wanted to say that I appreciate your vision, and working with you the last 6 months has been very easy, and you being in that seat is the primary reason that I ran for the board. So I'm very happy to be here.
All right. With that, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the superintendent contract.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. And next up is a purchase agreement for the Tyler building. And I know there was a lot of questions from the public and directors, and so I think we can have a pretty good conversation now. But Matt, I think you probably want to lead us off. Give us some
Yeah, so we're excited to bring you a purchase agreement tonight for the Tyler Building on ACT's campus. There's 2 action items there for your consideration. One is the actual purchase agreement, and then one is the pre-closing occupancy agreement, which would allow us in there before the actual close. What I really wanted to start with this evening is just anchoring back to the FMP timeline that we've spoke about a couple times this evening, and the multi-use educational facility that's accounted for in there, the budget line item that's there. And then just set that as a frame of reference that we've talked about seeking out an opportunity to do this, and some different uses that the district really has planned for this space. I kind of think about them in the short term and the long term frame of thinking. Right away, we know that we need a home for our PK-12 online program and staff. We do not have enough existing space at this current facility for our teacher leadership program for them to be able to do professional development opportunities and to gather in a large group. And for that matter, really professional development space throughout the district, whether it's through TLC, whether it's a gathering of administrators or a combo gathering when we do our principal and IDS meetings. This room is relatively packed in that scenario, and there aren't other spaces then to go to without disrupting our school days back in our school building. So that teacher leadership program, and then also just general PD space. And then finally, kind of the other short-term thing we would see right away happening in this new facility would be our technology infrastructure and staff, knowing that we've moved them a few times out on this campus, and now they're back in the warehouse. And Adam's team has grown and serves us very well, but they also need a home, and that was a key consideration for us in looking at this site too. I think longer term, we get more excited about some of the student potential opportunities out there. A key piece of FMP 2.0 was talking about career pathways and CTE opportunities for our students, and that we really see this as long-term serving our students in that mode. Do we have all of those plans narrowed in or zeroed in on at this point? No. We wanted to be honest and transparent about that, but we do know that on our current campuses, and especially relative to the east side of town, that jaunt out to the Kirkwood Regional Center is difficult. And we did a couple education committee meetings the last 2 months of the school year where we kind of heard some of those same themes about enrollment into those academies or some of those opportunities and transportation limits for our students. So CTE programming is definitely a large consideration in this one as well. So there are, I think, future student opportunities we'll continue to talk about, but I think we owe it to our community to talk about what would we be doing in that space right away. And it's really, in a sense, we've grown beyond this building. I don't think we're talking about moving everybody out of this building, but there are some needs like we talked about with the teacher leadership program and professional development opportunities, technology, as far as a niche area here that is just not able to hold at central office anymore. And then again, our PK-12 online program and staff that we've had at the Hoover Annex. And we know that Hoover will be gone as of this summer, so we need a home for them as well. So with that, that's kind of the uses piece. And then Chase is going to kind of go here next with Dwayne. You'll probably hear a lot from Dwayne this evening. And I thought based on some of the questions we saw in email and some of the conversations that either I or the team had with you today, we would just kind of lead off with answering some of those questions publicly and then take any follow-ups you guys have from there.
So Matt said I was next. He stole some of my thunder because I was going to talk really about FMP 2.0, and really this is not something that just developed over the last month or last couple of weeks. As we look back, even last summer, our first thought about this facility came out of those community engagement sessions that we had and understanding some of the things that we want to do different and more broadly on a district level. And so we first included that in a timeline in the fall, and as we worked with the ops committee and refined that, it continued to show up in drafts and really made its way onto that final draft that the board approved in April. And like Matt said, we're excited about this, and one of the reasons we are excited is it really is our first project in FMP 2.0 that we're bringing to the board. And I know one of the old mantras of FMP was on time, on budget, to go back to something that Chris Lynch said. And if you look at our timeline, the on time was summer of 2022. And so we bring that project because for the reasons that Matt said, we do need some space and we need it immediately as we move some of our projects forward. And so this is something that we've been working on. Clearly it's sped up over the last 6 weeks or so, but has been part of our progression in formulating FMP 2.0 in the fall over the winter and as we worked with the ops committee for that. I'm happy to answer some of the big picture questions, but as Matt said, we know the board had some specific questions on some of those pieces, and some of the work that Dwayne has done for us has really been our liaison with our different partners, whether that's through ACT or folks that we're doing our appraisals or some of our inspections and some of those pieces. And so Dwayne's going to go through some of the questions that we've got, give an overview, and then we'll open it up for a broader discussion as well.
Thanks. Well, I think I'll start with my impression of the building, being that's what I do. And, you know, it is a well-built building. It is a solid masonry brick structure with solid, well-reinforced concrete floors. I mean, it is built, if you know how Northwest Junior High was built, this building was built the same way. Only it doesn't lack a concrete roof. It has a more metal conventional structure on its roof. But the building itself, I've been in it, I don't know how many times now, but I have yet to find, in my mind, any deficiencies in the structure itself. Now, that's the structure. You know, I look at things like that. I look at what's behind the ceilings and under the floors, and that's kind of my thing. Every time I walk through it, I find something else. But it's a well-built building. There's nothing about this building that gives me heartburn. There's just nothing. Now, does it need some improvements? Yeah, I think it needs a second elevator. There's only one passenger elevator on one end of the building. And to your point, Charlie, you know, we need to be better ADA. And so it needs another passenger elevator. Can it be done? Sure, at the other end. And the only other part of this building, and then I'll get into maybe some of the other specifics, is that eventually the parking lot's gonna need some work. It's old, okay? But it's normal life cycle stuff. But the thing about this building that really pleases me is investment that's been made over the last 5 or 6 years. They've invested $7 million into this building, be it the roof, be it a new HVAC system, new lighting, new fire alarms, new finishes, a wellness center, you name it. And I can go through the breakdown with you, but they've invested $7 million in a building, which ACT's credit, they take care of it. They've had a good maintenance staff. I've gotten to know the director of the facilities, and they do it right over there. I mean, they stay on top of it. They take care of their buildings. So having said that, the building itself, when the appraiser went in there, they looked at just the finished floors, which is 83,000 feet. Well, to put it in perspective, Grand Elementary is 65,000, okay? And you add another 2,000 in the lower level. You're up to close to 130,000, and you're looking at 2 grand elementaries in terms of space, so that kind of helps you conceptualize how big it is. But the appraisers only look at finished space, which is fine. They really didn't give any consideration to the lower level. So they appraised it, what they felt was the finished area, which is 83,000 square feet, give or take. The building was built in 1978, so it is 40 years old. And it did need an HVAC upgrade, because if it were 40 years old, it would be in dire need of one, not unlike our elementary schools. You know, we spend millions upgrading our HVAC systems, and we get another 25, 30, 40 years, maybe 50 years out of them. And this building, I have no doubt, even though the appraiser said the life expectancy may be 20 to 25 years, and it's in the appraisal, I would say to you that the way we take care of buildings and the way we've reinvested in our buildings and reinvest in our structures, we'll get another 50 years out of this building. I have no reservations about that whatsoever. When you compare that to the buildings that we've been building and the buildings that we've upgraded, this is a fine building, and we will get a lot of useful life out of it. Appraisers look at, it's a snapshot in time. It's what it is today. But they're not aware of all the procedures and things and dollars that we invest in our structure. So I have no problem with that. We do, and as far as appraisal goes, they look at it 3 ways. They look at income approach, they look at a cost approach, and they look at a market approach. They did do an income analysis. Based on that, they felt that the building was probably worth, I think if I recall right, $8.8 million. They looked at a market approach, and they said the building was worth $9.275 or thereabouts million. Then they discounted that as a blend of the two and came up with their $8.9650, I think is the number that they used as their market value. And they did not use the cost approach because we didn't ask them to basically rebuild the building. But that I can tell you, if I were to give you a number today based on what we've been doing to rebuild that building today, in today's construction market, and being very conservative, at $250 a foot, because some buildings are now, school buildings, or bids are coming back at 300 plus, depends on the size, but the larger buildings tend to be on the lower end of the scale. So 83,000 at $250 a foot, if you were to build it new today, and this is the cost approach, and you were to buy the land, and you were to develop the land, you would have $22.5 million in that building, plus another $2.5 million for the land and the site improvements. So you're looking at a minimum, a $25 million structure if you build it new. It's not new, I get it. It's 40 years old. So we're not paying $250 a foot. The appraiser used $100 a foot, and in the market value, he picked up a building that was in Coralville. He picked up a building that was in Iowa City. I think he picked up one in Cedar Rapids, and maybe even one in Des Moines, West Des Moines, that he used as a comparison to this type of structure and the type of use and the best use for the building. And I think if you were to put a number on it again, it'd be at a minimum 25 to rebuild it. The thing, there's an intangible that's not in the appraisal that I think is worthy of mentioning, and that is the furnishings that they're leaving behind. You know, I know what we've spent on furniture here in this building and furniture in other buildings because we've done a lot of it. You know, I know a lot of it's been school furniture, but in this building in particular, and somewhat like Liberty, we have built cubicles and structures. The furnishings, and what I'm talking about, the cubicles now, in that building are first class. They're not low end, they're high end stuff, and there's a lot of it. And I think you could spend days and days and days trying to figure out how much furniture they're leaving behind. And that furniture in that building has to be at a minimum, even with some depreciation, a $2 million contribution to that project. They're leaving that behind. So if you ask me, you know, what's the bonus or what's the discount I think you gotta figure the furniture and all the things they're leaving behind. They are gonna take the foosball table, which, bit of a disappointment, and a few of the other game tables. But what they're leaving behind is amazing. It really is. And is a real contribution to the school district, if you ask me, because they could go through a process. There are people who will come in and take all that furniture and resell on the secondary market and recoup some money for ACT or whoever the owner is. So kudos to them, because it really is a plus. And it's not in the appraisal. They don't know how to put a number on it. So really, there's some value there. So there was a few questions that I'd like to answer real quick for you. One of them was, what were the actual replacements? And those totaled $7,673,000. They did upgrade the elevator. They did put in a new fire communication replacement system. They did do some road work. They did improve the data center. They did put a new roof on in 2019. The wellness center was done in 2014, 2015. In the HVAC, they did all the air handlers, the ductwork, the controls, all the water lines. They replaced sanitary sewer lines, the roof drains, acoustical ceilings. They put in LED lighting and sprinkler heads. That's a lot. That's a lot like what we're doing when we do a school. So that's a plus. The question was asked, do we have a ballpark estimate for the renovation? And my answer is, honestly, we don't know how we're going to use the building exactly yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if we spent $2 or $3 million improving that building. I don't know. We're going to create a big conference center. I don't have a number on that yet, but that could be some dollars. And we talked about maybe putting that conference center on the lower level where we have 40,000 square feet of space, you know, and we could do it there. We could put it on that middle level. But I don't have a number on that yet, so I'm just being honest with you. But it wouldn't surprise me if we spent $2 or $3 million there or more over time. It's not all going to happen. It's going to be spread out over time because we can't do it all. And I might just divert a little bit right there and tell you that making the assumption that this moves forward, and it's an assumption, I have on call for this Thursday. I have an architect. I have an interior designer. I have a structural engineer. I have a civil engineer. I have a roofing expert, and I have a hazardous material expert coming to inspect the building, to look for things that I haven't maybe looked for or seen or had the ability to dig into deep enough. They're going to do that, and they're all going to give us a report. And per this purchase agreement, you as a board have the ability to rescind your offer if there's something about this building that we don't like. You know, maybe there's something, if there's some structure issue that's uncovered, which I can't foresee, but we have that opportunity. We can make that call. So you need to know that those professionals are all coming Thursday, and I have the entire day blocked off, and they have the ability to come and go. I also have facility staff from the physical plant coming to give me their eye. Our custodial managers are going to come look at it. Our grounds manager is going to be there. Our head electrician, our head plumber, they're all coming to look at the building and give us their impressions as well, because they're the ones that are going to have to take care of it. And I guess that was the next question was, will there be an inspection? And I just answered that. The itemized list for the furniture I alluded to, I think that would be a daunting task for anybody to do. I will ask him if he has a list already that he's kept track of. It wouldn't surprise me, I guess, but to create one would be a lot of work. But, you know, as part of our due diligence, we can ask those questions. You know, the other question I asked was, what are the utility costs, okay? And he gave me the utilities over the last year and a half, maybe close to 2 years. I took the last 12 months so that they're more relevant to, you know, today's costs. And combined, and this, I know Charlie asked me this question, the bulk of that is electricity. There's very little of it that's natural gas. But the total was $89,000 over 12 months, which translates to $7,000 a month or 6 cents a square foot per month. It's pretty reasonable to heat and cool that building, which tells me it's pretty well insulated. And they just did the roof in 2019, and I bet if I dig into it, I'll find that they put new insulation on the roof of that building. So it's been redone. It seems to be very energy efficient. When you compare it to the cost of this building, very similar. So it's not outlined at all. The question was asked about the roadway out front. And in your folders, you have Exhibit B, and I would encourage you to pull up Exhibit B if you like, and then you'll know what I'm talking about. I don't know if you can put that on the screen or not, Kim, but maybe from there.
I can't.
Exhibit, here's what it boils down to. This particular property that this building sits on is 7.9 acres, okay? On the property at the north end is part of the roadway that's there, okay? It's an existing road. And as part of this agreement, we agree wholeheartedly that section that's covered by that blue line called the North Dubuque Road, that's the north end of this 7.9 acres. We've agreed with ACT in their discussions back and forth between the attorneys that we're going to try and dedicate that street to the city of Iowa City. If you look to the left of that blue line, right where the driveway comes in, where it says Dubuque there, Kim, if you can take it right where the cursor comes in, everything to the left of that driveway, of that blue line, going to the left or to the south, is already a city street. It's already designated on the Johnson County website as city property, and they already own it. We think it's in our best interest not to own North Dubuque Road, and it's in the best interest of ACT not to own it, but yet they need access. My concern, frankly, is that road built to standard? Because I've built some city roads. The district, we built a road down by Alexander. We built a roadway out by Hoover, out by Liberty. We have built and been involved in some what I call Class A roadways. And they have to have certain curves, and they have to have certain depths and certain reinforcement. And I was worried that maybe this didn't meet that standard, but I went out there and looked at it, and I got to tell you, it meets it. It's a well-built, and it's in really excellent shape. So that's about a 400-foot piece of roadway that we're going to need to work with the city that's in the contract. And this contract would like to see, if you followed it through, we'd like to see that completed by the time we close. Quite frankly, I've dealt with the cities long enough to know that that's probably not going to happen. That's going to take some time to get that done. The other part of the contract, and as long as I'm going there, is ACT Drive. There is another exit, ACT Drive. If you take that on around, it comes out over there on Scott Boulevard a little bit further to the east. That they would like for us not to use any more than possible. That they would like for us to use North Dubuque Road, and it's in the contract, as our primary entrance, which I have no problem with. I don't think anybody in the district would. And that makes sense, and we can put up signage, that says Iowa City School District, and get people going the right way. And that North Dubuque Road exits out next to the fire station, if you're familiar with where that is. So that's part of the contract. The other part is if you look down below the building, so there's a red line there, yeah, if you can put your cursor on it just a little bit there, Kim, between the two parking lots, you'll see a red line. There's a black line just to the right of that. That's the property line, but it's on that secondary parking lot that they want to retain the use of. So they want us to revise the boundary to where you see the red line and create barriers between those two parking lots so that we don't get people cutting through to ACT or vice versa. Okay? So we'll actually separate those two parking lots on that red line. And we will have our parking lot, and they will have their parking lot, and the two shall not meet unless we come to some future agreement that we need that lot. I would tell you that there's parking for between 200 to 300 vehicles on the lot as it is to the left of that red line on our property, would be our property. A lot of parking, both in front of the building and behind the building, and all the way down the side of that parking lot is also designated parking stalls. There's easily 200 to 300 spaces there. I haven't counted them all, but I can if you ask me to. I could count them here if you want me to do it. So, yeah, I knew what your answer was. So, anyway, those are kind of the stipulations around that. I know I've been bouncing back and forth. It was asked, the private road was asked about. I think I've explained that. The furnishings, the appraisal, the ballpark estimate, the improvements. There was one other question about, can we confirm? And I have no knowledge of whether or not that was ever in discussions with any other body. That's not, I really saw it as none of my business. Now, you do need to know that as part of the contract that we still are doing our due diligence. We still have the opportunity to go in there and figure it out and figure out where some of these spaces will go. That's why I asked an interior designer to come Thursday so they can start getting their mind wrapped around the programs that we want to put there. Because frankly, we'll need some professional help getting that done. So the firm that I've asked to do that is the same firm that did Liberty High School, that did North Central Junior High the first time, and currently doing North Central the second time and Northwest the second time. It tells you what I think of the firm. They do really good work. So I guess with that, have I covered most of the bases? I would answer any questions you might have. I'm sure you have them, Matt.
Yeah, well, just the one thing I would kind of say to put a bow on what Dwayne talked about there before we hear your questions would be some of the community emails referenced, I think once again, how can we spend $9 million on a building, or how do we spend all this money in FMP 2.0 timeline, and then how to not have enough money for staff, right? Well, that's our school funding formula. That's the way it works. We can use PEPAL and save dollars for facilities. That's why you see a lot of school districts throughout Iowa able to build gymnasiums, new school buildings, upgrade their facilities, but at the same time struggle with staffing. Staffing comes from a general fund. That's where some of our utilities and also some of those payments would have to be made, but that's what we incorporate anytime we have to look at a new campus like we've done at Grant or that we did at Liberty High School. When we bring those on, of course, we have to work that into our budget. So when you guys approved the FMP 2.0 timeline, we knew from a general fund perspective we would have to account for, okay, if we were going to purchase another facility, how does that work into our general budget on that end? Another budget fact of ours, we spend up to 83 cents of every dollar on people on that general fund side. And so remember, that's pretty high on that side of the equation. We're not overspending our money on operations in that end of our budget. So I think that should be a reassurance to people too, that the primary investment we make on that side of the budget is really into our folks and into our staff the best we can, knowing that we have that limited funding from the state. So appreciate Dwayne and Chase kind of addressing some of the questions I think we got from you guys today, but I'm sure there's probably something there that's still lingering or a follow-up question you might have that you'd like to ask the team.
Thanks, Matt and Dwayne and Chase. I appreciate you going through that list and explaining all that. And I definitely agree with you on the furniture. It is a very good deal. I think my concerns are in three primary categories. And, again, Matt just brought up the idea of the operational costs. And so I guess what I would like to know is I would like to see what the projected operational costs are going to be for, say, the next 5 years. I think that would be something that our community would want to see, and that would be something that I would need in order to go ahead with this personally. Not just utilities, but insurance, maintenance, custodial, whatever you understand.
Sure.
What is going to take to operate that building, because again, and I said this to Matt, before, it does seem like a really good deal, almost too good to be true. But again, only if we need it, it's only a good deal if we need it, and if we don't actually need all that space, then it becomes a liability, especially with that operational cost and the strain on the general fund. And so, to that point, the other thing that I would really like to see more of is really some more concrete plans about what we are going to do with the space. We have some really great ideas. I like the ideas. I just think that I and some people in the community need to understand better exactly what we're going to do with this space. Especially since we are opening up a lot of space in our elementaries by building onto the 3 junior highs to make middle schools. I would be interested in knowing how many empty classrooms we have across the district. I know, for instance, that we have 6 empty classrooms at Wickham, I was told, alone. So I don't know if that's true, but I guess I'd be interested in kind of understanding that, that space issue better. And then lastly, and getting back to the operational costs, you told us the utilities. You know, when we toured the building, which of course, the building is beautiful, I agree, it's very well built, it's empty. So has it been occupied the last 12 months?
I think partially. It hasn't been fully, so
Okay.
that's a valid point,
Okay.
that it hasn't had the full capacity.
Okay.
I know they've been online, you know, in the pandemic, so,
So I wonder if we could get utility costs for maybe a few years back?
sure, I can ask.
Okay, that would be great. And then lastly, I have
I
some
think
issues.
I would qualify that by saying
Okay.
that and this is getting into the weeds, but I need to ask them what the kilowatt hours were, because rates change.
Got
So
it.
you can look at the actual
Yeah.
consumption of energy, and that's what I'll do.
Okay, so that'd be something I'd be interested in. And then the contract itself, I think there's some language in there that I'm not comfortable with. Some things that really should be the responsibility of the seller, and asking for us to share the cost of parceling out the land. And they're not only asking us to maintain the Dubuque Road issue. If the city is going to take that over, I would really like that settled before we sign. I would really like to know if that is indeed going to happen. And then the issue with the ACT Drive and ACT Circle, I believe it's called, they're asking us not to use that road, but then they're also asking us to equitably contribute to the maintenance, repair, and replacement of those roads. And so that language I'm not comfortable with. I don't think the district should be responsible for that. And I'm just wondering also what happens if ACT ceases to exist. Are we then fully responsible for those roads?
Okay,
so
no,
that's
that wouldn't be our problem at all. That would be the owner, the ultimate owner, say they go into bankruptcy, the ultimate owner of that property would be responsible for that, not us.
Okay.
Well,
I just,
It's not on-
I just have a lot of questions about the language about the responsibility
The
for
way
the
this
private
is-
roads there.
Excuse me. The way this is crafted, the streets are not on our property. They'll be on ACT property because we're actually taking a piece of that 7.9 acres where ACT Drive is and deeding it over back to ACT. So if the road is on their property, and then if we can dedicate the North Road to the city, none of the streets would be on our actual property. But if I can start answering some of the other questions before I forget, I'm almost 72 years old. I'm trying to keep it going, you know. First of all, well, it's true. First of all, a year ago, when we were doing our facility master planning for 2.0, I sat through a lot of Zoom meetings because it was still the pandemic, and with Lisa and Charlie and others. And we heard over and over and over about career pathways and career tech. And to myself, I kept saying, where are we going to put this? We don't have the place to put this stuff. And I came from Des Moines where we had a 500,000 square foot facility to do that. And it's still probably one of the best career tech centers in the Midwest. But I said to Matt and Jace and others that there are a lot of programs you can put into a building without a lot of equipment costs, fashion merchandising, you know, things like that, where you can create alternative pathways. This is a perfect building. And is it too good to be true? Well, when it came along and Chase and I go, it is too good to be true. I mean, we've been talking about career tech and pathways and space and where to put these people. And here it is. It fell in our lap. And so, can we make it work? Sure. The utilities part, between Les and his office and facilities, and we'll come up with what it would cost to maintain it and take care of it. That's not an issue. I would reiterate that you also have the opportunity between now and whatever date set in there to take back your offer if you really, for whatever reason. You know, if you really, in the next 2 or 3 weeks, would say, you know, this is really not what we want to do, you have the opportunity to back up. But the benefit of approving it, if you do, is that we can get started on the due diligence, more of it, and I can get more of those answers for you from the building. So it's a process. You have an out in the process. In terms of maintenance, they weren't very specific about what we would have to do to help them maintain ACT Drive. But here's what I see. Our snowplowers go out at 2 in the morning, okay? And we got to plow our lots, and to get to them, we're going to go down ACT Drive, Dodge, and we're going to help them keep the snow off. We're going to help out. We're going to do what we need to do to get to our property. So I think it's going to be a pretty beneficial thing for both us to be able to go on to ACT Drive to move snow or whatever, to get our buildings opened every day. So I see it as a very workable relationship between the two parties. I don't see it as adversarial at all. They've been really good to work with. So,
I mean, the snow removal is one thing, but the actual language says repair and replace.
right, yeah. And they're actually doing some repair work now at the far east end on their own. So they're making some improvements now that will last for a long time. The roadways in general are not in bad shape at all. Like I said, the front of the building is in really good shape. A lot of it's concrete. There are parking lots or what need help around the facility, which wouldn't be our responsibility. So, and one other comment, you know, the pre-occupancy agreement, I was asked this question. Well, you know, they asked us to help pay for the utilities. They asked us to help pay for their property taxes and some of the maintenance on the building, but they're not charging us any rent. So that's the rent. Help them out. You know, if we have to be in the building for 2 or 3 months before we actually close, because we're waiting on the city, we have this agreement in place where, you know, we help pay for some of the expenses in that second agreement, and that's fair because they're not charging us $1 for rent. So that's kind of a, you know, backdoor way of doing it, but it's fair.
Are there any restrictions if we were to want to resell the building?
Absolutely none. Not what I read. There's nothing in it. There's no covenants put on the building at all, but in terms of the agreement and any specifications. I think they're pleased that it's a school use. I think the city will be pleased that it's a school use. I think it's a win-win for a lot of folks, particularly kids who want to go down that career pathway. I know we've talked about teacher learning center and all that, but my focus has been how can we convert some of those spaces for career and tech, because that's the world I came from.
Excuse me. I love those ideas. I just wonder if we can kind of put them out there for the community to see if that is possible. And then lastly, I'm just curious about how we did come up with the purchase price, because I have seen the assessment and another appraisal, which is not really in alignment with that. And
Well, I was made aware of that today, and I understand it's 4 years old, and so, you know, markets change. And I also understand the purpose of that might have been from it was initiated by the city of Iowa City. So that in itself, they were looking at what the assessed value of that building should be, and the assessed values are always lower than the market value. So it doesn't surprise me that it's less. It doesn't surprise me it's 4 years old. So none of that should concern you, except that, you know, it's somebody else's opinion, but it was done for a different reason. And in terms of the market, or the price, was the price of the 8.75 was the price that ACT proposed to us, and we felt it was fair.
I just want to chime in and thank the team for all the hard work on pulling this deal together. For those of us that were here for Portrait of a Graduate and that process, I think the community very clearly told us that CTE is a huge part of what they want to see us as a district do going forward. Like you said, Dwayne, we built that into the FNP 2.0. I know that for the past 2 years, we've been looking for sites all over town, As part of Ops Committee, we've heard different sites floated to do this type of work, and it's so exciting that we've landed on the Tyler building compared to what the other options were. I mean, I think it's easy to say that it's just light years ahead of anything else that we've been looking at as a district. So I just think this is an exciting proposal, and I'm excited to vote for it tonight.
So I have some questions and comments about that. CTE is important, it is a priority and has been for a while, and it's only becoming more important as we look at the job market, and but it's not on our immediate use plan. I mean, I understand we want to do it, but that's not one of the things we want to put in there right away. And I'm just thinking about what we're hearing from the community. They want to know, it is a great building, it's beautiful. But that's not really what they care about. The community, and as a representative of the community, I want to know, do we need it? We want it, and you can blend want and need, that's fine with me, okay? We don't have to be desperate for the building, that's not what I'm trying to say. If we're going to use it for CTE because we really have been looking for years, then let's make sure we dive into that pretty quickly, right? I understand, as Superintendent Degner said, that you expected to purchase a building like this because the FMP 2.0 was indicated that we need this kind of space for the items you mentioned, or the programs you mentioned. Did we think we needed this much space? These are not rhetorical or sarcastic questions. Like, is this too much space, for example?
I don't think we would be bringing it to you if we thought it was too much space. So I don't think we'd bring that recommendation with something we thought was exorbitant or a misuse, or in bad faith judgment of the expense of district dollars. So I think what we actually see it being able to present is probably a broader solution than we thought we might be able to do, where maybe we would have been looking for something for just CTE and online programming. Now we have the potential to serve other problem areas in the district. So I do think it's a need. I don't think it's just a want. I think if we're committed to some of those things that we talked about in the planning of FMP 2.0, like seriously expanding CTE offerings, if we're committed to standing up the online program in a long-term capacity, if we're continued to support our teacher leaders and make sure that they have the space they need to do those things, I think it serves a lot of different needs for us in that end. And so we would never bring something that's a want. We're not in a budget climate where we can just deal with wants all the time. Like you said, we can kind of blur that line, but I do think it's a need for us, and we can definitely use the space. I appreciate what Director Finch is talking about being able to articulate some of those ideas more fully. Honestly, CTE programming is hard to talk about. What exactly do you want to do until you do have some parameters around your space, till you know what you're working with and what kind of programs we can align to that. If we have this, that opens up a lot of possibilities for what our students could be exposed to or that we can provide, where we have certain limitations right now on school campuses or with the regional center about what we can do. So I do think that is a necessary thing we would need to come back to the community with as a next step, is to say, now here's what happens from an educational programming perspective. The needs I talked to you about from the onset would be, this is what we need to do right away. I think the last 2 years, this spring, when everybody was able to start coming back in person, we realized how quickly some of our programs and our opportunities had grown for the adults in our district, and how we're really have grown beyond even some of the renovations we've done here for opportunities we need to provide to our staff. So I hope that kind of addresses a couple of the things there you're asking about.
It does, and so then the next, that's very important. I think the community really needed to hear that, and the more information we give them, the better, about how we're going to use the space. And I understand that's what you've started to do tonight, and it's very helpful. Then the other issue for me is the cost of it, because that assessed value isn't just less than, it's way less than the appraised value. And I mean, I do that kind of work for a living, and I found that pretty startling. And so we can talk about that, because this isn't the last day we're talking about it. I mean, right, we're looking at this longer, aren't we? What's the plan?
Tonight's a vote, it's an action item.
So it's the
So
action
we're,
item. Okay,
but we'll continue, I think, to answer your question, as Matt and Superintendent Degner and Dwayne mentioned, that the outcome of the vote will determine where the conversation goes.
okay, that's the confusion I had. So I'm just wondering, it's really awkward to talk about a negotiation of a purchase price and purchase agreement in a board setting, but it's what we have to do. You mentioned this is the number that ACT came to us with. And of course, I'm sure you know that I've never accepted a number that someone came to me with. I wouldn't do it on a personal level, I wouldn't do it in a negotiation for my job.
So I would like to answer that. First of all, the price is out there, so it's public, so you can discuss negotiations in public. It's not inappropriate at all, from my perspective.
Into the microphone, just so they can hear.
From my perspective, I don't think it's inappropriate to talk about it at all, because it is public right now. So, but in terms of the value of that building, 135, 140,000 square feet, really a usable space, even though some of it's in the basement. When we first looked at it, I said to Matt, to Chase, you know, this building, I know what it would cost to build this building. And I know it's expensive, but even at $100 a square foot, which is unheard of today, it doesn't happen anymore. At $100 a square foot, that building was worth, in my mind, $14 million at $100 a foot. And when we can buy it for less than 9, knowing what it takes to build new buildings, it's a value. So even though they propose it to us, I got to give you my honest reaction was, it's a good deal because of what it would cost to replace that structure with a similar building. It'd be 2, 3, 4 times as much. So it is a value, I think, and believe to this day, you know. And the market appraisal came back. I thought it was going to be a little higher, frankly. But even at $9.2 million, or whatever was the number he used, it's still a value, and he based it on today's market. The market goes up and down, the market values change. And so this particular appraiser, this firm, I've used many times, Craig Hansel's used them many times. They're well-respected in the school communities and done a lot of school appraisals. They did, I don't hate to bring it up, but Theodore Roosevelt, you know, and they were right. They said $1 million, and what did we get? $1 million. And I doubted them. So they are reputable, they do school work. The appraiser, the senior appraiser has since passed away. This is his son doing the work, but he's been doing it for 20, 25 years, very capable. I don't know him as well as I knew his father, but I have every confidence that they did the right thing. They went out and looked at the market. As in terms of how it compares to the assessed value, we all know our assessed values on our home are less than what we'd take for it if we were to sell it. And it doesn't surprise me if it's only 60% of what a market value is.
48%,
Yeah,
isn't it? That's a pretty
Yeah.
big difference.
And it was done for a different reason. My understanding is it was done to determine the assessed value and not the market value. So and until if somebody wants to give it to me, I'll read it. But until I am able to do that, I would say that it was done for a totally different reason. And 4 years ago, the market's changed, so.
The other thing about the cost, you explained how the furniture in some way offsets it. So if we're thinking about that, are we going to try to use that furniture? Are we going to sell that furniture? Do we have any idea? But the bottom line is, you think that it has value regardless, because we will either use it or sell it. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay. Again, these are questions that we have
Yeah.
to answer because the community is
Yeah.
asking these questions, right? Then the other leap you make in your analysis that I don't think is intuitive for people that don't have your experience is, this costs us 8-something million, I think it's it's right in front of my face, 8.7. And to rebuild it, it would cost 25 million or something like that. Who cares? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I don't understand that. What? I don't care. We weren't gonna build it.
I'm sharing you how my brain works, and how I placed a value on that building. So I know that from my perspective as a builder, and that's what I am, that it would cost me much more to replace that somewhere else, let alone buy the land. And the land could easily be $2.5 million developed. So if I say to you that that's a $25 million structure, it is. That's what it would cost to replace that structure and buy that land today. So that's why I say to you, I think, in my heart, in my mind, believe that 8.75 is a real value.
Okay, and my final question is a follow-up to Superintendent Degner, and that is, you talked about what percentage we use our general fund on staffing versus operations, and that it's, I'm gonna use the word disproportionate, but that we really do spend a lot of money, 83%, did you say, on staffing? And again, I'm asking questions on behalf of the community. So we don't have the same level of sophistication about that equation. I'm thinking to myself, well, considering the budget cuts, shouldn't we spend as much as we possibly need to on staffing? You see what I'm saying? That's an intuitive question. So if maybe you could give an answer about, explaining further why you're talking about operations versus staffing. And I'll say, maybe you already gave that explanation when you talked about the need for the space, okay? Maybe we've already built the answer to my question. But I do think that that's something that will stick with people that listen to this meeting or have these discussions is, well, we already spend a lot more on staffing than we do on operations. Everybody's like, good, I'm glad, right?
Right, but you still have operational costs, right? We still have to keep the lights on, we still have to keep the buildings cooled, we still have to keep the buildings heated. And so I think what I'm trying to articulate when we say that number, I think Les would probably tell me the high end of that indicator is about 80 cents of every dollar is where you'd want to be. We're actually more in 83 cents, maybe even his last report was 85. 85 cents is where we've creeped up to. So we're really efficient on the operations end, so we can invest it in our people. That's the point we're trying to make. It's not that it's bad. I think it just shows how greatly efficient we are on the operations end, that we can invest 5 cents more of every dollar actually into a person that serves our kids in the schools, rather than having to carve out 20 cents there to go to the operations expense. So that is something we keep an eye on, because we know those people are recurring costs for us as well, and they're not going to go away. So I think Director Finch was the one that kind of brought it up initially here today about, how do you factor in those operational costs? Well, I think we have a pretty good model for doing that, and we have a good track record of doing that, about that we keep those costs going to our folks, into the people that serve our kids, rather than into just operational costs that eat away from that general fund and our ability to do that. Hope that helps.
That does. I'll take a break. I'm sure other people have questions.
Just want to make a comment about the difference between the assessed values and the price we're talking about. I looked at the assessor site today, and it occurs, as I read it, the assessed values over the last 20 years for this building varied between 8-something million, 8.5 million, which for the majority of that period of years in that period of time, down to whatever it is now, 4.5 or whatever, right? And it reminds me personally that I'm not supposed to use assessed valuations to get at market price, because assessed valuations are oftentimes calculated based upon other factors than market comparisons.
Could be a
Now,
lot
I
of
may be wrong about that.
No, you and I can have a great discussion, Charlie, because we're the same mind on some of this stuff. But it's assessed values can change based on requests from the owner to change it. It can be based on improvements that were made. It can be the assessor assuming that no improvements have been made when in fact there's been $7 million made. So they may not have had factored all that into their assessment yet, because they're always a year or two behind. They only do this every 2 years.
Yeah, one year the building was assessed at $10 million. So.
Yeah, so, who knows? ACT probably thought it was overvalued at the time, so, without going back and dragging up all that history, but there's a lot of reasons for that.
I think we've had great discussion with some very good questions and concerns raised that allowed the community concerns to come forward and for us to continue the conversation. So just thank you for those comments. And for Superintendent Degner, I do appreciate you highlighting the immediate use of the space because our pre-K-12 online program has been, I don't know, to me, it doesn't feel as though we're investing as much as we should in ensuring that they feel as though that they're a part of the district with a dedicated home. We had them out at Old Hoover. They're not there anymore for obvious reasons as we see things going up around there. We've talked a lot about investing in our teachers, and in order to do that, we have to have space for the teacher leadership program and the offering of professional development, because we hear that a lot from staff, and I know at least I do, especially when I'm out in the buildings, that they don't feel as though what the board states from the table, policy, and some of our comments related to professional development actually carries through in some of the offerings and the way that it's offered. So hopefully having space that we can dedicate to that, I think will address our needs because we're not getting smaller. We're a public education district that constantly seems to, every time we build something, tends to fill up pretty darn quickly, to me, it feels as though, with new classrooms, new buildings. So I'm excited about the size of the space and in my other life, the type of job that I do, and sitting on some of the new construction projects. To me, the price of it for this size of a building was astounding. So I was looking for where's essentially the body's buried, because you don't get a building for that price, for that size. Having recently sat on a building that's about half size of what we're looking at, brand new, easily 5 times more than what they're asking, and it's still not as spacious with as much workspace that the Tyler building is offering. So I'm excited for what this potentially holds for our district. But in addition, continuing the conversation to make sure those questions are further addressed and talked about like we do with most of our other new building projects that we have seen over the last few years since I've been on the board, that it's a continual conversation on to ensure that we're utilizing a space in the best efforts that meets the community needs.
I just want to say one more time, though, it's a beautiful building, but we're getting it for its appraised value. We're not getting a steal on this. I mean, I just want to make sure because the community can see how much the appraised value is. So like, it may seem like it's worth a lot more, but it's not. I know the community knows that. They know how much, they know that people aren't lined up to buy the building. So I think that that's relevant.
I would say that just in response to what Dwayne said about how the market has changed in the last 4 years, and I mean, this is true. The market has never been so low for office space. People aren't buying office space. So that's how the market has changed in the last 4 years. I would just ask that we just put on the brakes and get the answers to some of the questions that I've asked. I know that you were approached about buying this building 9 months ago, so you've been marinating on it for 9 months. I'm just asking for a couple more weeks so that we can have some answers to some of the questions I have about the access roads and the parceling of the land and how we're going to, and to communicate to the community how we're planning on using the space and what the projected overhead is for the next 5 years. So I would just ask that we table the vote until we have some answers to those questions.
All right, so I'm going to obviously look at my fellow directors here and whether they want to do that, right? I'm going to need a majority of folks that want to table it. I could tell you that those questions are not a deal breaker for me. I know that our plan had in it to get a purpose building in it. I know that our operations team has looked at multiple buildings across the area, and we've never found one that was good. We found smaller ones that were probably going to cost more than this. So I'm not one to just say it's a deal, we should just go buy it, right? I don't go to the mall and say, hey, there's a sale, I need to go buy something I don't need. I'm not that person. We have needs, we've got to put our PK-12 program somewhere now, right? This building will work for that. I would give you the direction right now, Matt, that put CTE in there. That's my direction to you. Make sure that that happens sooner than later. All of the other things that we've talked about that need to go in there, this is a place that it will work for. I am prepared to vote on it today. If folks are not, I am fine with that as well, but I need to hear that from everybody before we just table it, because I'm not willing to table it if the majority is prepared to vote. One way or the other, if you're prepared to vote. I guess I'm not necessarily in favor, you're just prepared to vote. So if folks need more questions answered, I would like to hear from everyone if we want to table it or not.
I have a question. I think for me, it boils down to what everyone who listens to this is going to be asking me. They're going to say, did we get the right price for this building? How do I answer that if we didn't counteroffer? And I'm not being sarcastic. I really just want to understand how I can say confidently this was a good use of the tax dollars for which I am a steward.
I guess the answer I would provide is you trust us to go get information, to bring you agreements that we think are in the best interest of the district, to forecast the cost and the needs of the district, and to try to align those within our budget parameters. And so I think, Dwayne's had a great track record, here in the district over the course of the first FMP. He hasn't missed when we've looked at different projects. And so there is some level of trust there. I understand what you're saying, but I think we've also been pretty transparent about what we project the cost to be, how we've tried to account for this in the long term, how we think it meets our needs. Are there more things that we need to continue to articulate around it? Sure. But I don't think that there's, from our perspective, anything that would give us pause in a recommendation to you. So that's why it's sitting in front of you tonight. If you have reason to believe that's different, then obviously that's your job as board members, right, to communicate that and to do that. But you're not going to get different information from us, I don't believe at this point, that would tell you we think this is something you should reconsider. Unless we get to an inspection and then we learn of a structural issue, then we would of course come back to you and revisit that. You're getting our best foot forward in this purchase tonight around what we think is in the best interest of the district.
And based on President Eyestone's question, I'm not willing to table it.
Go ahead, Charlie. No, go ahead.
I'm willing to go ahead and vote. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think procedurally, since it's an action item, we should vote, and if people wanted to table it, how they express that is to vote no. So I would go ahead and move that we approve the purchase agreement for the Tyler building that is on board docs. And
I second.
All right, so there's time for further discussion before we take the vote. So I'd want to make sure everybody says their piece before we do take one.
I, just in the part of the discussion and responding to Maka and Jane's points about the purchase price, I am looking at seriously at the appraisal. I purchased a lot of residential real estate as part of when I was on the Housing Fellowships Board and President, and we relied upon appraisals exclusively in determining what the best price was.
My only point of discussion, it's not about whether or not I trust the work you've done or any of the transparency of it or his expertise. Dwayne Van Hemert knows, I think he's great at this. This is really not about that. This is about a typical process to coming to an agreement on the cost that I don't know that we did. I'm not trying to put an obstacle up. It just seems like it's a good price is what I keep hearing. Or no, I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing we can pay for this. We have the money to pay for this. But that's not what I'm asking.
Well,
I'm asking how do we come to it? And what I want you to be able to tell me is, Maka, this is a great price. we didn't feel like we could drive the price down, because based on all the information, this is what it should cost us, and there's no way they would go down from it, or if they did, it would be de minimis. That's the kind of answer that I hope we can get to.
So if you don't mind, I gave you my builder perspective, what I thought the building was worth. And so it, on first glance, great price. But we're also obliged as administrators in school district to go out and get an appraisal professionally done to give us advice, So if you dig into this appraisal, there's at least 5 examples that this appraiser used to compare the value of this building to those. He put a price of like $100 to $115 a foot on that building based on current market values in Iowa City, Coralville, Cedar Rapids, even West Des Moines, I think, if I remember correctly. And put a fair value on it. And so, we're in the process of negotiating on some of the details. And it comes back at $9.2 million is a fair price based on the square footage, based on the market values. Then we did the right thing. And ACT did the right thing. And ACT came to us with what we thought was a really fair price. But take our expertise and set it aside, the appraiser thought the same thing. So, I'm good with it.
Do any of the other board members have a response to that? That was helpful. I'm just wondering, I can tell you're ready to move forward, but does anyone else have any thoughts about what I just said?
Not about what you said. I will say that my vote will mainly represent the fact that I'm not willing to use taxpayer dollars to help ACT maintain, replace, or repair their roadways. And I just ask that we have that language in the contract reworked before we take a vote on this.
Director
That
Finch.
my vote tonight will reflect that concern.
Director Finch, I was kind of waiting to come back to that because we talked about that a little bit and I reread that, and we will have that done. Actually, that's in that same section, and Dwayne talked about if things didn't come to fruition that we did have that ability to back out. So the second half of that section talks about that before we close, what equitable means will be defined, and so we can carry that message forward about, okay, if we can't use this roadway, what does that really mean our responsibilities are? And so even if this moves forward tonight, that doesn't close that conversation. And actually the language of the purchase agreement says that we have to come to resolution on that before we close. And so that definitely will stay on the front burner because it's something that by the language of the agreement, we have to get hammered out and put some numbers around. Now, whether or not that's a number that, is where you want it to be, I can't speak to that, but what I can tell you is that won't be ignored, that it is something that we'll have to go back and make sure that we talk through and have a better understanding of where the board is on that now as we have that conversation, with ACC about our contributions to some of those pieces.
So before I vote for this, which I am actually going to vote in favor of it, I want to make the record clear that I tried to push back, and I think I did a decent job of it. I think I've pissed some people off. But I did get answers that I need to hear, and I do have a longstanding knowledge of the expertise in the room, and I am making a choice to trust that expertise, not just Dwayne, but the admin in general. And I also feel that you've answered my questions well. I will say that Rhodes' answer helped me. It kind of pushed me over the edge. That was one of those things that was still getting to me a bit.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate the receptiveness to the grilling that occurred tonight, but I do think it was necessary because, again, we're stewards of tax dollars.
And I don't think we disagree with that. I mean, we want to be able to provide the information that you all need, as Matt said.
I actually rather enjoyed your grilling. So.
Well, then I'll do it every time.
Day's work.
It was a lot of fun.
All right. Anything further? All right, Kim, I'm ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, next up is the pre-closing occupancy agreement for the same building, and Dwayne did kind of allude to it, that there's some agreements to help pay utilities and things like that, but living rent-free is always awesome. I don't know if there was more to add to the story here.
There really isn't. The reason for this is not naturally, but normally in a real estate deal, you don't take possession or start occupying a property until after the closing. Given the timing of this, what we've tried to work out with ACT is the ability for us to occupy before the actual closing because of the due diligence we need to continue to do to make sure that this is the right property. But the calendar doesn't wait, and as we've talked about for the online program or TLC, there's some work that we need to start to do this summer before that. So this is an agreement just between us and ACT to outline their responsibilities, our obligations, and some of the things that will happen over the next now 6 weeks, I believe, 7 weeks before we would be able to close at the beginning of August.
I would just say my experience with these matters is that the pre-occupancy, the risk and burden is on the seller. So I don't have any issue with this.
Any other comments, thoughts on this piece?
There is one risk to the district, and I'll just put it out there. We need to run our own fiber optic to that building. So we have a project that we're working on right now to extend the fiber optics into that building because per the contract, ACT doesn't want to share their fiber. So we will expend some money. So there is a slight risk to us as well because we need that if we're going to put the online program in there.
Yeah, that's fine. That's not the kind of risk I was thinking of, but thank you for disclosing that.
I would have described that as another reason we need to get into the property earlier, because if we wait until August, we won't be ready to go.
I just want to know if there's cost associated with
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. All right, anything further? I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the pre-closing occupancy agreement with ACT.
Second.
Any further conversation? All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. So down to our upcoming events. We have a legislative update. Session finally ended.
Yeah, so it did end, and while I think some of the issues are going to continue to plague us for a period of time, there were some helpful things that actually died with the legislature from our perspective, and then one includes the school choice or voucher bill. The governor's voucher bill did not pass. The transparency and parents' rights provisions, while framed in an important way, and we of course want parents to feel welcome to our schools and that they have rights and that there's questions they can ask. Most of those transparency provisions we had already provided in some way, or that we have an avenue to do, but those also did not come to the floor for a vote. The mandatory reporter and misconduct BOE requirement did not also go through. There was talk about a teacher recruitment stipend that we could potentially access through the management fund, how we do our early retirement payments, but that also died. Superintendent severance limitations died, and the $19.2 million in appropriations, supplemental appropriations also died. So a lot of things that didn't make it to the finish line. A few things that did. There's going to be no longer a praxis requirement for teachers in the state. They increased the IPERS limit up to $50,000 for retired folks. And then also the big one that'll probably cause the most change in our system in the immediate future is the change to the open enrollment process, that there's no longer a March 1st deadline. They are changing the good cause exception, no longer to be based on whether or not that enrollment is approved, but rather to athletic eligibility. Districts could agree to just waive the athletic eligibility period. We will not take that stance. We will continue to say that if you're open enrolled to us, there is a 90-day ineligibility period. I think our team's perspective on that is it leads to some poor behavior by adults about recruiting kids in from other school districts and things that way. So of course, if a student qualifies through a bullying and harassment issue or a founded case of that, then that athletic ineligibility period is waived. But that is probably one to note, and I think it was a little bit of, we didn't get our way on school choice, and so this is the one thing we can do to probably create some school choice where we just take away the open enrollment deadline.
So So on that, we basically just
Yep.
can't say no, right? Or open enrollment just happens.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty difficult to reject open enrollment without a deadline anymore, because usually if it was ahead of that March 1st deadline, qualified through an application, we would have to work on it. So, and there could be some loss to us, right? As well as, I mean, I think it's not going to be good for culture in an aspect of when we get upset with something, now we can just leave right away, whether that's somebody coming to us or somebody leaving us. They don't get an answer they like, and then they can immediately leave and access another district. So it'll be problematic on a few different fronts. You're right, President Eystone.
It's like flipping the card
Yeah.
table and going home.
Some good news I wanted to end with, though. We were, along with several other Grantwood Area Education Agency districts, selected for the Teacher and Paraeducator Registered Apprenticeship Grant. And so that helps continue to support our Grow Your Own Teacher to Para to Teacher pipeline. We know we had already talked about those 10 spots. The folks came to the microphone and introduced themselves. We had talked about having over 80 applicants. This could potentially free up a whole other 10 spots for us. And so we're thankful to the Marion team who kind of took the lead on this application, but a lot of local districts submitted. We had asked for 10 spots and we were approved for those 10. So we're excited about that and the opportunity to continue to support growing our own folks in the district.
Awesome.
Director Eystone, I don't know if any of the board members saw today where the governor announced a $100 million allocation for safety through Department of Public Safety and allocation to help schools. I don't have any details on it yet, but it's one of those things that we'll continue to monitor. And if you see anything, let us know. With, obviously it's something we're going to certainly pursue and make sure our buildings are safe as they can be, but I just want to let you know that that was just thrown out there today.
Yeah, I did see that and saw that, sounds like up to $50,000 for
Each
school
building
districts.
is the way it's
Yeah,
worded. and
that's
it-
the way it's worded, so
yeah.
I'm like 50,000 each building times all of our buildings. That's pretty exciting that we could possibly use that to enhance our security.
Yeah.
And it says it's through a reimbursement grant. I think one thing that I'll be interested to assess is how much more could they really equip us to do than what we're currently doing?
Yeah.
And then if we've already done some of those things, could we still submit reimbursements for that? I think that'll be an avenue we want to talk about. But they also talked about things like vulnerability assessments, digital critical incident mapping technology, and probably beefing up some back-end technology since we know that's how we are able to get ahead of some of the threats. And so radios for schools, we already have radios. I'm not sure if that technology from the radios that the state will support will, outdo the ones that we currently have in play. But then a couple other things again around digital applications and software for reporting intelligence. She'd also talked about funding the School Safety Bureau that hasn't been funded by the legislature. So there's a few key pieces like Les talked about there that we'll see what comes from it. And obviously we'll be pursuing that to make sure we get maximum benefit for Iowa City Community Schools.
What I read said that 80 million is going to go into a pot, and the first step is for schools to seek a safety assessment for each of those buildings, and then after the assessment targets needs, then you can use the money. So I would just hope that we would get in the queue to get all of our buildings assessed through the program, so we can see anything that we may have overlooked.
I think
Those that's
they've
gonna come
bitten
out
off a
next,
lot,
yeah.
lot more than they're going to be able to chew in a timely fashion here too, because I think a lot of people will. So
'Cause I think
sorry,
they're still
Chase.
taking some bids on who some of their providers are going to be, but it'll be a couple weeks before they open those things up to the system.
And I think last thing I keep thinking of stuff as we're talking about. They also talked about if we've done a local assessment that we could use that to potentially already kind of get into the portal per se or into the application part. So my guess would be we'd have some of those assessments already completed that we could forward that information on.
All right. Thank you for that. Next item is our director liaison report. I don't know if there's anything folks wanted to highlight. I know that, are all of our graduations on here?
Yeah.
They might be. That's the best part of the year, is going to the graduations. Handing out diplomas to the kiddos that we know is, it's awesome. So it's my favorite perk, so I'd highlight that every time. Anything else directors wanted to talk about?
I do. I wanted to highlight, so I, as part of school board duties, sit on the Juvenile Justice Youth Diversion board, which is a board of community stakeholders. And I just wanted to highlight, I think we've heard a lot about, from various groups, the need to have more community involvement in our schools. And I wanted to highlight some of the great things that the county and these community partners are doing to help with our schools. None of this is our money. The Johnson County is supporting these through a grant program they've pushed out for. They're going to push out $400,000 to various community groups, but I want to highlight it's things like Big Brothers Big Sisters coming into North Central Junior High for after-school mentoring. It's G World doing weekly circles for 7th to 12th grade girls. It's RVAP doing health education to our 7th and 9th graders, as well as our 5th and 6th graders in our 21st century learning communities. It's UAY doing a weekly art club at Coralville Central, Kirkwood, and Wood. And so I'd like Superintendent Degner said, thought we could end on a positive note that there are some really great things that the community is partnering with and helping to get into our schools. Again, I don't want to think that we're taking credit for this. This is nothing we're doing, but the county is really supporting these ventures financially, and I'm really appreciative to the Board of Supervisors for prioritizing programs like this with their limited means. I think they're going to do great work in our schools this year, and I'm excited to see what they do.
I just wanted to mention, I attended a couple of Mom Demand Action meetings and events, and I just want to extend their appreciation for the board's passage of the Be Smart resolution. And in talking to parents who didn't know about that passage, but were genuinely excited to hear that the district will be reaching out, encouraging them to take part in that program annually, and not us taking a stance on gun ownership, but just being responsible with guns. So that's just the widespread message I was able to receive at both events that I attended. People were very appreciative of that action.
I just wanted to mention in regard to the graduations, I didn't know how I would feel about using all of our time Memorial Day weekend, and I loved it. And as my family is a City High family, to go to each of the graduations, the transitions, the online, I hate to say it, I didn't get to go to Tate. I will make sure I go to that forever. But what a beautiful district, and each school had their own personality, and it came through in the graduation ceremonies. It's too bad we can't all experience each other's schools, right? In each other's feeder school, high school, but it was wonderful for me to see. It just made me as confident as ever in public education.
It was wonderful to be a part of, and I truly appreciate all the hospitality that it was extended towards the board by the individual schools.
Last week, I attended a meeting of the Johnson County Interfaith Coalition, a group I've been a member of for quite a long time. The coalition is led by Pastor Anthony Smith of New Creations International Church. At this particular meeting, Pastor Smith had invited members of his church to come to the meeting and share their pressing concerns about life in Iowa City. And the members who were there talked about the school district. They were women who had grandkids in the district now. And they had a number of things they wanted to let the coalition know about, and they also want to let this board know about too. Many of them are things that we've heard before: parental involvement, bullying in schools, mistreatment by teachers, and other issues. So the next step that the Interfaith Coalition is going to take, or JCIC, is to have a subsequent meeting with, I think, at the Dream City or Dream Center, and have another group of people come and talk to the Interfaith Coalition group. And I've been so bold or so rude as to suggest that I would talk with you as a group, as a board member, and Superintendent Degner about eventually maybe arranging a meeting with this group, not necessarily at our facilities, but someplace else. So that might be coming up in the future. I just wanted to let you know.
Very good. Anything else on that? That's a nice segue into our last item, which is our agenda setting. You can see the meeting there on the 28th. All the regular stuff, nothing out of the ordinary is on there, so want to make sure that we get some stuff on there that we need to talk about at our next meeting.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jenny.
Jane, go ahead.
Okay. So I've had several in the community reach out to me, and I share this concern as well. About the lack of a secure entrance at West High, and I understand that maybe City Highs might not be ideal as well, but I don't think that's on the FMP. Anyway, my point being is that I'm wondering if us as we as a board can take a look at the FMP timeline and see if we can move up the construction of the secure entrance at West High.
That was actually my comment, so great minds, high five.
Yeah, I'm very much interested in that as well, too.
I don't know if it needs to be at the next meeting, but I'm wondering if we could have an item on the agenda be about cell phone policies district-wide. It's everybody's favorite topic, I know.
I would also like another
Like Chase is looking at me and I can't tell why. I think we need to talk about if we have restrictions on cell phone use, why we do, why we don't, where we do, where we don't.
I would like another discussion regarding Hills. I know some questions came up tonight. Hopefully, if administration will be able to have some of those answers, but we as a board need to figure out what we're planning, what our next steps are once we get those questions answered. Because I think I know that's the right thing to do. We can't leave it with just this conversation tonight. We have to continue the conversation to figure out how we're going to address it.
Anything else? Anything, Matt, from you or the team that we need to get in June? I know everybody takes a little bit of a breath, so.
We'll have our equity update back on there, just to more have a conversation about how we want to approach future equity updates and what might make sense for your guys' expectations and things our team was thinking about. Otherwise, no.
Okay. If there is nothing further, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone.